Sirens rip through the California sky. A black motorcycle cuts like a bullet through traffic on the 210 freeway engines, howling helicopters circling above. Cars scatter and danger in real time. As the feed streamed across California, one vehicle stood out, a gray Toyota Camry, merging into the chase. It didn't belong to any marked unit, but inside sat an off-duty narcotics deputy, still in civilian clothes, his badge hanging from the mirror, listening to the call unfold. The moment he saw the live broadcast, he made a choice that would later define both his career and a national debate. From the air, the chase looked like a scene of Trump's renewed law and order doctrine, which prioritizes rapid, decisive intervention over prolonged negotiation. Supporters countered that hesitation kills. They pointed to the suspect's live firearm, his erratic path through dense traffic, and his proven willingness to murder an officer. In that split second, the deputy's intervention didn't just end a chase. It may have saved countless families. As the smoke cleared over the 210, one truth remained. America had watched justice unfold in real time, and it was neither clean nor comfortable. What does it mean when the line between protector and executioner blurs on the nation's freeways? And how far should a country go to defend itself when hesitation could mean more graves draped in flags? The image of that gray Camry slamming into a speeding motorcycle replayed across every American screen for days. Headlines split the nation. Deputy's daring move ends. Deadly pursuit versus vigilante justice on the 210. The debate burned hotter than the wreck itself. But inside the San Bernardino sheriff's suit on his department-issued radio, when the broadcast deputy down came through, he rerouted from home, fell into the chase path, and made a tactical decision under pressure. Legal experts interviewed if they believe it's necessary to prevent imminent death or serious harm. That clause, reinforced by the Supreme Court's Scott v. Harris 2007 decision, recognizes vehicular ramming as justified when the suspect's driving itself poses lethal danger. Saldivar's speed, documented at 147 mph, qualified beyond doubt. Still, critics asked, what about command approval? What about protocol? The Guardian reported that the department's pursuit policy emphasizes continuum escalation, gradual measures before lethal intervention, but experts countered that motorcycles don't allow gradual response. They vanish between cars, outrun cruisers, and turn one wrong move into a pile of corpses. The deputy in the Camry faced a moving equation risk multiplied by speed. Eyewitnesses told Al Jazeera that Saldivar at one point lifted his left hand to brandish the pistol, reckless and deliberate. To many officers watching the live feed, that was the defining second. Once you raise a gun on a freeway, said one veteran of Los Angeles County, you're no longer a fleeing suspect. You're an active shooter in motion. Inside the department, the mood turned somber, not celebratory. The deputy who made the move wasn't boasting. He sat silent in an internal affairs office, blood still on his hands, his voice flat as he described the seconds before impact. I saw the weapon. I saw the cars. I didn't see any other way. From a tactical standpoint, the choice reflected a growing shift within U.S. law enforcement toward prolonged chases by 32% according to Defense News, but also reignited debates over proportionality and oversight. Across America, law enforcement agencies now face this with the conscience of a nation. And so the question lingers in an age where danger moves at 150 miles per hour. Should the law expect hesitation or demand action? By the next morning, legal experts filled the airwaves. Objectively reasonable, one declared. Potentially reckless, said another. America found itself split between two visions of justice, one grounded in the letter of the law, the other in the morality of restraint. The freeway, once cleared of twisted wreckage, had become a courtroom of public opinion. The heart of the legal argument traces back to Scott v. Harris 2007, where the Supreme Court ruled that an officer's use of deadly force to terminate a high-speed chase was constitutional when the fleeing suspect's driving posed a substantial and immediate risk of physical injury to others. That ruling became the shield and sword of modern pursuit policy. It's cited in every academy, reinforced in every briefing. The San Bernardino deputy's defense rests squarely on that foundation: a murder suspect armed, reckless, and endangering the public, deadly force permissible. But law doesn't always settle conscience. Critics, including analysts from The Guardian and DW, argue that America's policing culture has absorbed a combat mindset shaped by 2 decades of counterterrorism and reinforced under President Donald Trump's intensified law and order agenda. Trump's 2025 directive, known as the National Response Framework for Violent Crime, urges agencies to terminate ongoing lethal threats immediately to protect the innocent. Civil rights advocates call it a license for impulsive violence. To defenders, the phrase terminate lethal threats isn't an abstraction, it's a command to save lives. From Reuters to Defense News, analysts agree that the real-world conditions of modern pursuits have changed. Vehicles reach aircraft speeds. Cameras broadcast every second live. One officer's hesitation can translate to multiple civilian deaths. The calculus has become mechanical. If not stopped, how many die? Inside San Bernardino's Internal Affairs office, investigators laid out the sequence frame by frame. The Camry's impact speed, measured at roughly 110 km/h, hit the motorcycle's rear axle. The strike wasn't random, it was precise. The deputy had angled his car to absorb the collision, minimizing lateral debris. A calculated hit, not a rage-driven strike. It's what's called a terminal intervention, said a former LAPD pursuit instructor quoted by BBC News. In textbook terms, that was the least lethal way to end the deadliest scenario. Still, civil liberty groups demanded an independent review. Where's the threshold, asked one advocate on Al Jazeera. If every officer can declare imminent danger, what stops the line from moving? Their concern isn't theoretical. Over 340 suspects died in U.S. police pursuits last year, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Nearly 1 in 4 were unarmed. Yet even among critics, few could ignore the visual reality, Saldivar holding a pistol while weaving through commuter traffic. For DW's European commentators, the case sparked a wider question: is America's obsession with televised policing body cams, live chases, breaking news fueling its most violent moments? They note that in Germany, police pursuits are terminated when speeds exceed safety parameters, with air units taking over. America, one analyst wrote, turns enforcement into spectacle, and spectacle into justification. Behind the screens, the narrative cuts deeper. The US remains a nation wrestling with its own duality: freedom versus security, law versus humanity. Trump's Justice Department sees strength in decisiveness. Advocacy groups see danger in normalization. Both are right in fragments. And as footage of the crash replayed on primetime television, one line of commentary from Reuters captured the unease. When a government must defend the act of ending a life to protect others, it exposes the paradox of every democracy. How much force is too much when restraint costs lives? So what defines justice in modern America? The clean letter of constitutional law, or the unclean truth of what survival sometimes requires? At dawn, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department stood shoulder to shoulder in silent formation. A black ribbon hung over every badge. Patrol vehicles idled with lights dimmed. Deputy Andrew Nunez's body, draped in the American flag, was carried through a corridor of salutes. The image officer's motionless helicopters hovering overhead became a symbol of what service demands and what it costs. Inside the department, grief mixed with guilt. Could it have been prevented? Was there a warning sign missed before Saldivar pulled the trigger? Domestic violence calls are known as the unseen ambush routine until they explode. According to Reuters crime data, nearly 1 in 5 officers killed in the line of duty in 2024 died responding to domestic disputes. Nunez's case now joins that grim statistic. Truth was setting in, the department's unity would soon face its hardest test. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into both Nunez's shooting and the pursuit's conclusion. While command staff publicly praised the off-duty deputy's swift action, investigators privately combed through every dashcam frame and radio call. Under the Trump administration's National Integrity Directive, all officer-involved deaths, no matter how justified, trigger automatic federal oversight. At Washington's Justice Department, analysts began drafting a report for the National Use of Force Commission, a Trump-era initiative that centralizes review of high-profile enforcement incidents. The report, shared with BBC News, notes a pattern of individual heroism operating in systemic gaps, translation officers making battlefield decisions because bureaucracy moves too slowly. Within the thin blue line, that description feels both compliment and curse. Many officers view hesitation as betrayal. Every day they balance two contradictory orders: protect life at all costs and use minimum force. Deputy Nunez's death sharpened that contradiction to a blade's edge. The department chaplain addressed it at the memorial. Courage isn't reckless. It's the act of walking into chaos, knowing it might break you, and doing it anyway. His words drew tears, but also questions. How many more young deputies will be asked to make that same walk? Public opinion split along familiar lines. The Guardian profiled the grieving family, framing the case as a failure of early intervention. Meanwhile, Defense News published an editorial titled "Courage Under Fire: The Cost of Hesitation," arguing that officers need greater autonomy to neutralize threats swiftly. In Germany, DW commentators compared the ceremony to Bundespolizei tributes, somber disciplined, yet haunted by the same dilemma: how to honor fallen officers without glorifying the violence that took them. Every democracy, one analyst wrote, must decide whether its protectors are warriors or guardians. America, it seems, asks them to be both. For Nunes's colleagues, the answer isn't philosophical, it's practical. They still respond to calls, still knock on unknown doors. The lesson isn't about glory, it's about readiness. Training academies across the country have already begun revising their first contact protocols, incorporating lessons from the case. The Department of Justice, in coordination with DHS, is considering a national Blue Shield response standard, a uniform model for handling volatile domestic calls. But for now, amid the flags and folded uniforms, the human story remains raw. A child will grow up with stories instead of memories. A wife will raise 2 children alone, and a department will carry the ghost of a deputy whose last act was simply answering a door. Can any nation truly measure the worth of a single life given for its safety, or the silence that follows when it's gone? By the end of that week, Washington, Sacramento, and local command centers across America were reviewing their pursuit policies with renewed urgency. What began as a single call on Hollyhock Drive had triggered a national conversation about the rules of engagement on American soil. The words policy review echoed like an alarm, because in policing reform always arrives written in the blood of the last tragedy. At the San Bernardino headquarters, investigators lined a wall with whiteboards detailing every second of the 210 chase, the timestamp, the GPS data, the acceleration curve, and the precise moment the off-duty deputy swerved. His decision now sits at the core of 3 parallel reviews: pursuit procedure, off-duty activation, and use of force authorization. Pursuit policy, once a local concern, has evolved into a federal conversation. Reuters reports that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice are jointly evaluating whether existing pursuit models adequately reflect modern urban traffic density, public broadcast pressure, and evolving vehicular technology. With electric bikes and modified engines capable of outrunning standard patrol cars, the pursuit window, the time between offense and potential catastrophe, has shrunk to mere seconds. Off-duty activation adds another layer. The BBC confirmed that most departments allow self-activation under exigent threat standards, especially in cases involving homicide or imminent danger to officers. But critics from The Guardian argue that this policy risks chaos. Without clear command coordination, the chain of accountability fractures. The Trump administration's law and order doctrine defends it as flexibility, a system that empowers trained officers to act when seconds decide survival. And then comes the heart of the review: use of force. The key question before the San Bernardino Board of Inquiry: when is a car a weapon and when is it a shield? In the Camry's case, the data indicated calculated risk mitigation, an act meant to disable rather than destroy, yet the optics remain haunting a civilian sedan ramming a motorbike under live TV. Beyond the mechanics lies the deeper truth: domestic violence calls remain America's deadliest variable. Al Jazeera notes that such incidents accounted for nearly 15% of all officer fatalities in 2024, a pattern mirrored globally. These calls fuse emotion, unpredictability, and access to firearms in a single volatile package. In Saldivar's case, his divorce finalized just 8 weeks prior. Neighbors reported raised voices and gunfire sounds days before. Each warning unheeded, each call disconnected steps on a path that led to one fatal knock at a door. To prevent another Nunes departments nationwide are testing predictive intervention models, AI-assisted threat assessments that cross-reference domestic abuse histories, firearm ownership, and restraining order violations. Trump's DHS has already approved the rollout of Project Shieldline, an algorithm-driven system designed to flag high-risk households before police arrive blind. Civil liberty groups call it digital profiling. Law enforcement calls it survival. Meanwhile, the National Police Federation is revising its pursuit and containment manual, proposing a tiered authorization model: air unit tracking for speeds under 120 cm/h, autonomous kill switch requests for electric vehicles, and authorized vehicle interdiction for cases exceeding imminent threat thresholds. It's bureaucracy chasing adrenaline, a paper leash trying to catch chaos. And still, in every roll call room, one unspoken truth remains: no policy can perfectly balance law and life. Officers carry the impossible burden of choosing in milliseconds what committees will debate for years. As reform drafts circulate, America faces its recurring question how to legislate human instinct. When violence erupts without warning, will policy matter more than courage? In the weeks after the crash, the debate left California and entered the halls of Washington. Lawmakers, commentators, and international observers from DW to The Guardian framed the event as more than a tragedy. It was a test of America's evolving identity under President Donald Trump's second term. The question wasn't just about pursuit policy anymore. It was about philosophy. What kind of nation does the United States want to be restrained and cautious, or resolute and feared? President Trump addressed the case during a Homeland Security briefing, calling Deputy Nunes a symbol of American courage and consequence. He reaffirmed his administration's consequence doctrine, asserting that law enforcement must act decisively when chaos threatens order. Critics from Europe and the UN Human Rights Council warned that such rhetoric risks transforming public safety into sanctioned aggression. Yet inside the White House, aides insisted this was precisely the message the world needed: deterrence through decisiveness. Under this doctrine, federal funding now prioritizes rapid interdiction technologies, AI-assisted pursuit analytics, drone relay tracking, and tactical collision simulations. According to Defense News, these innovations reduce chase duration by 40%, saving lives on both sides of the badge. But the technology itself carries moral implications. When enforcement becomes algorithmic, who bears the burden of choice, the officer or the system? Globally, allies and adversaries are watching America's internal enforcement strategy as a reflection of its broader geopolitical posture. Reuters' analysis draws parallels between domestic pursuit tactics and U.S. military doctrines abroad: preemption, proportional response, and calculated dominance. The same decisiveness that defines border operations or overseas strikes now defines domestic policing. Law enforcement, a BBC correspondent noted, has become America's microcosm of power projection, firm, visible, and unapologetic assertive. At the NATO headquarters in Brussels, analysts privately discuss the Trump model of internal order, swift justice, at-home deterrence abroad. In this framework, the line between domestic law enforcement and national security blurs. Supporters claim it restores deterrence in a chaotic age. Critics fear it normalizes state aggression. Meanwhile, in San Bernardino, life resumes under the shadow of that freeway. The black ribbons fade, patrol cars return to standard rotation, and Deputy Nunes' locker remains sealed, its contents untouched, a private memorial to duty's price. His name now joins a wall of heroes at the County Memorial Plaza. Visitors stop, touch the engraved letters, and whisper the same unanswerable question: was it worth it? The freeway chase that once gripped the nation is now a metaphor. It represents America's race between justice and restraint, between the instinct to act and the burden to reflect. Every siren, every pursuit echoes that moral velocity. DW summarized it best: the United States is both the driver and the road, a country accelerating toward safety, yet haunted by the cost of its speed. And perhaps that's the truth of it all. America's greatness lies not in perfection, but in its If that question haunts you, too, subscribe, stay engaged, and never look away, because the next decision that shapes America's conscience might be racing down another highway right now. The story of Deputy Andrew Nunes and the 210 freeway chase unfolds as both tragedy and mirror reflecting America's evolving struggle between justice, restraint, and power under President Donald Trump. After Nunes is killed responding to a domestic violence call, an off-duty deputy ends the suspect's 150-minute flight by ramming him off the road, a move that divides the nation. Legal precedents justify it, moral debates ignite. The narrative expands into questions of federal policy, police reform, and America's global image. Analysts from Reuters, BBC, DW, Defense News, The Guardian, and Al Jazeera trace the event's implications across law ethics and deterrence philosophy. What begins as one officer's split-second decision becomes a study in consequence of courage policy and national identity. The story ends not with closure, but with a question that defines every democracy: how far should a free nation go to